Hello and welcome to EPR with your favorite environmental enthusiasts, Nic and Laura. On today's episode, Laura and I talk about traveling in a country where you don't speak the language. We interview Trent Romer about sustainability, writing, and giving your first TED Talk. And finally, in accordance with that story, and according to the Space Foundation, as of November 7th, 2023, 676 people have journeyed to space by the U.S. definition of an altitude of 50 miles. Of those astronauts, 643 have reached the Kármán line, which is internationally recognized at 100 kilometers, because of course there's a difference, right? How fun is that? But I couldn't find anything that says how many there have been since existence, but it's more than 500, so we know that. How about that? There we go. And if you don't understand what that means, listen to the episode. Hit that music.
The Pennsylvania Association of Environmental Professionals, PAEP, is hosting a webinar on Thursday, February 15th at noon Eastern about evaluating ecological risk under Pennsylvania's land recycling program. Pennsylvania's land recycling program, or Act 2, encourages the cleanup and reuse of contaminated commercial and industrial sales across the state. This presentation will discuss the process of identifying and evaluating potential impacts to ecological receptors at sites in the Act 2 program. Check it out at paep.org. And now it's time for 30 seconds of sponsor fun with Nic. Nic, are you ready?
I guess.
Brace yourselves, everyone. Go.
You know, when you're in a factory, right? And you're like, man, there are so many rats here and there's food everywhere. This is gross. I hate it, right? What if we could repurpose those rats? You know, as we all learned from Meet the Parents, you can milk anything with nipples. So here we go. Rat milk. That's right. We got rat milk today. It is absolutely 100% nutritious. It is absolutely 100% from rats. And don't worry, we're using the rats that are already in our factories anyway. This is as sustainable as something can get. There you go. Rat milk. Look for it on shelves. And there you go.
If you find it on the shelves, please run away screaming.
Ratmilk.com.
Get to our segment.
It's fun to be in a place where you have to learn a little bit of the other language that you're there. It's just
for sure.
It's hard to describe, like just how vulnerable that feeling is in a way. You know, I remember being driven to Machu Picchu, the town of Machu Picchu, from Cusco, which they are not close, by the way. They're hours away. And we have hours of driving with someone who literally speaks zero English, not a little, but like zero. We stopped along the way at a couple of like destinations and he was trying to tell us what was going on. And, you know, you're trying to like, I have like basic Spanish, but we get to one spot where, you know, we had seen some like murals in a beautiful valley and all these wonderful things. It's really cute. And then we get to another place and he just pulls over and he's like, un momento, trying to get us to come out. And then he's trying to say like, what's going on? And he keeps pointing and pointing and pointing. And I'm like, what is he talking about? And then I see that there's this, it's like one of those hotels on a cliff.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's basically like you're sleeping 1,000 feet in the air.
Oh, those things look so cool.
Yeah, but it's like just like sliding into a tent. You have to climb down and climb up to even get in the thing. And you know, there's like a pod.
Kind of my bucket list.
I don't know. I mean, like, I'm not even afraid of heights, and I don't know if I want to do that. I just don't know why. But it's like that doesn't seem as secure as I'd like it to be. You know.
I wonder if I would sleep, or if I would just be like awake all night, like, or just like you know how you wake, you like jump yourself out of sleep sometimes.
Yeah.
You'd just be doing that all night, like
Yeah. Am I falling my death?
Oh shoot.
Yeah, come on, Laura. Gosh, yeah, no cursing. Yeah, I don't know. So you would do that. You would do the mountain.
I would do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would have to be like, I need to read a lot of reviews. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want, if there's like a one-star review where like, yeah, the bottom opened up and I lost my friend, then I'm not doing it. But
yeah, you know, I have to agree with that. Like if it's completely secure, then yeah, I'm good. Mm-hmm. There's also the ones that are like a glass housing that are popped out of the side. It's not like you're in a tent on the cliff, you know?
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah.
But how do you say that in Spanish? Like,
yeah, I know. Actually, the funny thing is he was trying to make the joke. He's like, he was like,
por
noche, you know, it's like for night, you know, he's trying to say sleeping. And I'm like, no, gracias. That was too funny. But we had a good laugh about it, and we didn't even we didn't even speak the same language. We both understood. It was really funny.
Yeah, it is fun to like. Well, I mean, there's times where I'm like, man, every time I should have practiced more before I got here.
Right.
I should understand more always.
Yeah.
But then I am always still proud of myself. I ordered a vegetarian burrito the other day. Like they didn't have it on the menu, and I'm like, can I have that? Is it vegetarian, please? And they're like asking the cook, yeah, you can. And it was amazing, And I'm like, cool. I asked for what I wanted and I got it.
Right. Solamente vegetales, I think is how you, Una burrito solamente vegetales. I think that's how you'd say it. I don't know. It's close enough to me.
Yeah. It's like, pero tener una burrito vegetariana. And they were like, they got it. Like,
yeah. Perfect. That's perfect. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the way I'd say it would literally just be vegetables. There'd be no rice or beans or anything.
Well, it ended up being like avocado and tomato and cilantro, and that was it. But it was delicious. It was, and then it was grilled, good, which is like perfecto, like amazing.
But yeah, I mean, like we have this thing like in English too. I mean, it's every language really has like little regional dialects, little things that are a little bit different, and that's always so fun for me. Like when we have like just the way we say things is different, and even there, like I think so in Puerto Rico, for example, right? If you say frijoles, which I think almost everyone knows is beans, right? Arroz, y frijoles are rice and beans. But if you say it there, they'll just look at you like, oh, you're not from here. And they call them habichuelas. And it is the coolest. Like, it's just, I don't know why. I asked and they're like, oh, I don't know. It's just what we've always called them. And it's just really, really cool. And I love that. It's just a little nugget of like, being in this area, you better say it this way, because if you don't, they'll laugh at you. It's kind of cool. Never malicious, of course. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, you're not from here. But yeah, I mean, and there's like lots of other ones. I think I when I was in Ecuador, I had my guide said that his favorite slang term was when someone from Argentina asks to plug in their phone. The way they say it if you're in Ecuador means to like, have sex. And so he's like, why would you want to make sex with your phone? I was like, I don't like that at all. It's like plug in, and
right, yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's a good one. That's pretty good.
That is funny. On that note, let's get to our interview.
Hello, and welcome back to EPR. Today we have Trent Romer, Sustainability Operating Partner for Private Equity, author and dad on the show. Welcome, Trent.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, a lot of great and wonderful titles there. To start off, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Give you a little bit on my background, and maybe that will frame out sort of where I'm at now. I was born and raised in a plastic bag manufacturing business. My grandfather started it back in 1961. My father owned it for 20 years, and my brother and I have owned it for the last 20 years up until 2021. My father's one of 11. I have 32 first cousins. So it was very much family owned and operated. And what we did was we custom make plastic packaging. So think about bread bags or apple bags, or you walk up and down Home Depot or Target or Walmart and you see paintbrushes and staple guns and all this stuff in plastic packaging. Most of it's printed. Think about mailers, all that type of thing.
Yeah.
And somewhere in the mid 2010s, my brother and I were owning it. I started to feel uneasy about the product that we were putting out there. And lo and behold, around the June 2018 cover of the National Geographic had a plastic bag sticking out of the ocean that looked like an iceberg. And it said right on the cover. Do you remember that, Laura? Yeah.
Yep, I do. Yeah.
So it said plastic or planet. That was all it said on the cover. And that sort of brought what was going on in Europe over to the States in a very real way. And it really talked inside the magazine about how plastics has proliferated in our society and how it was increasingly winding up in the natural environment. So this anti-plastic narrative that sort of was already bubbling inside myself suddenly was out there for the world to see. I think we all saw it, but it really crystallized, I think, what a lot of us were feeling. So that's sort of that cover and that magazine and all the contents in it, which actually served as a really good roadmap for me, really set me off on this journey to sort of say, how can we both survive and preserve, right? Because we employ 70 families and we can't just stop making plastic bags tomorrow. And the plastic bags isn't all bad. So how do we navigate this? And sort of moving in a sustainable direction sort of began to make me feel like we could both sustain, preserve, and survive. So I sort of went on this journey starting from that point. And I did a bunch of things. We can get into that a little bit. But eventually in 2021, our sustainability efforts led to private equity interested in investing in our company. We actually sold to a private equity company in 2021. They asked me to stay on as a sustainability operating partner with the firm moving forward. And that's what I currently do. So the private equity firm owns about 15 companies. And my job is to go to those 15 companies in all sorts of different industries and try to implement sustainability initiatives within those industries and those companies.
Yeah, that's a really great, unique path to get to where you are too. So you talked a little bit about the journey. So you see the article come out and now you are in sustainability. So how did you get to a point where you felt, you had the experience and expertise to be a lead for sustainability in the industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't really know what to do, to be frank with you. So in the story inside the National Geographic really did expose the proliferation of plastics, but it also talked about this idea of a circular economy. And I think that's sort of in the common narrative now, but it's really about how can we create this economy with no waste? How can we begin to avoid the landfill, that type of thing? So that set me off on this journey of trying to learn more about the circular economy. I applied to a week-long executive education at Harvard University. I actually got in. I spent a week on Harvard's campus. So I didn't go to Harvard, but I was there for a week. So it was very, very, very humbling, and felt super vulnerable to be frank with you at times. I'm,
of course,
sitting at these dinners and whatnot, with the head of sustainability from Major League Baseball and from NASCAR and from, some huge, huge industries. And here's the little old Clearview bag trying to sort of learn the same thing.
Awesome.
Right.
I went over to Europe because they were ahead of the States. So I went to some plastic conferences over in Europe to try and learn about what they're doing. We joined the Sustainable Packaging Coalition, which is a North American-based coalition interested in moving the packaging business in a sustainable direction. So I spent a week in Seattle at a conference there. So all of these learning experiences, I was blogging about them and putting them on our Clearview website. And lo and behold, I started to see this narrative and I was like, wow, there's kind of a book here. So all of these blogs started to turn into a book. And so the title of my first book was called Finding Sustainability, because quite frankly, I didn't know what the heck I was doing at the beginning. I was trying to find it. And I think when we hear that word, we're all like, well, what does that really mean? So all of these sort of adventures and learning experiences turned into this book where I took that back to our company and began to transform our company, both in the products we put out there and how we operated to try and move in that direction. So I just sort of learned over time. And then every time we interact and you talk to somebody else in this space, you always learn for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And like I say, I know we'll dive into your books here in a little bit, but before we get to that, you talk about, you learned some of these sustainability initiatives, you wrote a book on sustainability and all these things. So how does that translate? What is your definition of sustainability and what are some of those initiatives that you implement?
So I always think about this. So not only when I was with the company that I owned for so long, but now I go to other companies and try to implement sustainability within those companies. They don't know me at all. I mean, they do know I wrote a couple of books, but they may not have read them. It maybe give me a little bit of credibility, but quite honestly, they may not be interested. They don't know about it. So what I try and do, I think the sustainability issue has some political implications to it. I think people politicize it a little bit. And what I try and do is strip that out. So what we look at the companies that I deal with and Clearview Bag back when I was in 2019 was look at it from a stakeholder standpoint. So every industry, every business has stakeholders interested in the business. So some common stakeholders interested in any business are employees, customers, the supply chain, communities, non-governmental organizations, regulation, government regulation, public sentiment are all influences on the business. And I think when companies take an honest view of their stakeholders, they begin to feel pressure or begin to feel something that says, hey, maybe we should entertain moving in a more sustainable direction. And I think when you look at it from a stakeholder standpoint, you give yourself room to move in that direction based on what your stakeholders are asking you to do. This isn't what Trent says or what Laura says or what Nic says or whatever. It's what your stakeholders say. So what that really does, I think, for most companies is any kind of sustainability issue to address has to be good for the business. This is not philanthropy, and private equity is not interested in philanthropy. Well, they are, but not to the degree of driving as a strategy the business. So it has to be good for the business and for its stakeholders. So what are those initiatives for each company where it fits that criteria? So I'll give you two for Clearview Bag. There was a whole bunch of them, but two in particular were really good. So the first thing we tried to do back in 2018, 2019 is we tried to make it like super simple. You know, you hear this all the time: reduce, reuse, recycle, right? Reduce is the first one, right? Right. Reduce is the first one. So how can we reduce our waste internally? So we did some math and figured that for the $17 million in sales that we had done annually, we generated 600,000 pounds of plastic waste internally to make those custom orders.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So I went to our production manager. I said, what would you say if I said we want to reduce our waste by 25% or 150,000 pounds next year in 2019? He paused, he looked at me and he said, well, it would cause us to act in a different way. And I said, exactly, right? Like, this is exactly what we're trying to do, is trying to think in a different way. So that set in motion a bunch of different things that we did internally. And what a waste reduction initiative for any company does, it involves everybody. And everybody can understand it. It's not that, you know, you're doing a waste reduction initiative and it has a, you know, this triple bottom line effect because you're not buying as much material that you're throwing out. You're not wasting energy and labor on running waste. And instead of running waste, you're running billable material. So it sort of has this triple bottom line effect, and it affects everybody in the entire company. So we did this year-long waste initiative. And one of the things we did within the year was we did this thing called Waste Week. We've all heard of Shark Week, right? I don't think I think about sharks, right? Other than once a year.
Right.
Once a year thing, whatever. So we sort of used that same idea and we created this Waste Week where in mid-June of that year, we gave heightened attention to waste in our company. We did a bunch of educational things. We brought in a bunch of guest speakers. We did some t-shirts. We did some gaming exercises, and we had a food truck at the end of the week. So it was sort of this heightened awareness of waste. So we tried to make it fun, you know, sort of as we went along. So that was sort of one of the things that we did in a year. We actually were able to do that. It was a year-long thing. We did a bunch of other things to try and reach that goal. Mm-hmm. The other thing we really wanted to do was what are we putting out into the world? What are we giving our customers? Are we giving them more sustainable options other than just fossil fuel-based plastics? So we wanted to try and vet out a bunch of different materials that we could potentially use. And we used 3 criteria to vet out any new material. 1, could we run it on existing equipment? In other words, we can't bring in material that we can't run on existing equipment, being that the equipment is, you know, $400,000, $500,000 per machine. So we had to make sure we could run it on our existing equipment. Number 2, if we were to run out of the material, could we get it again? Meaning, is this just a one and done, whoever's making this material, that we can't get it again? And 3rd, is it priced reasonably? You know, we pay $1.75 for raw material right now. If something was $25 a pound, we couldn't buy it. No one's going to buy it.
Right.
So we vetted out 10 different materials with those 3 criteria. And we came up with 3 that we've stocked ever since, and we began to promote. 1 was post-consumer recycled content material, meaning the material is partially made from consumer waste. So instead of the consumer waste going to a landfill, it's rerouted to make new material. The second one is a bio-based material. So instead of the material being made from fossil fuels, it's made from plants. And then the third one is a certified compostable material. So at the end of life, if it finds its way to a home composting facility or an industrial composting facility, it will compost. So none of these are perfect answers. And I always say, if you're waiting for the perfect solution, there isn't one. Right. And the direction of change is much more important than trying to make it perfect. So all of these three options aren't perfect, but they're certainly moving in a more positive direction. So those are the two of the big ones we did: a waste reduction initiative, and then trying to give our clients, our customers, an alternative to what they're already buying. And we began to double quote. So when somebody sent us an inquiry, we would say, hey, here's a quote for what you asked for. And, oh, here's a quote for one in post-consumer recycled content, or here's a one for compostable, whatever. And that helped us get some momentum.
That's really cool. I like that.
That is really awesome. But let's get back to your books. So you mentioned that you had one book published already. And then I think you have 3, but tell us about your latest. This Is Our Home. You released last September.
Yeah. So the first book was about the business and about this journey that we went on, and I began to document and then put it into a book format. And the cover of that book showed a kayaker on this sort of peaceful looking lake, just a lone kayaker, sort of this idea of this person having a journey to go on. And the most popular question I got from that book was, who is that on the cover? Is that you? Like, who is that? And I was thinking to myself,
hilarious.
The reason I put that on the cover is because I wanted the reader to think it was them.
Right.
So being that I was being asked that question so much, I realized that I wasn't doing a very good job of making the reader feel like they have their own journey to explore. So that's why I wrote the second book. The second book is truly about the reader. The first book is about the business. The second book is really about the reader and trying to get them to feel like they have their own journey to explore. And I think so many of us feel overwhelmed by the environmental issues that we see and we experience, and you feel paralyzed to take action. You're like, I don't even know what to do. I don't know where to start. So this book is really meant for them, for that person who feels overwhelmed. And this book, I think, will help you to communicate, to think, and to act in a more sustainable direction. And it's told through a story. Both books are more of a story. They're not a scientific book at all. There's sort of a nonfiction narrative in there. So as you're reading the story, I try and teach as we go.
That's awesome. So you said that you want the picture on the book or the contents of the book to relate to specific target audience. But who are those people? Are they everyone, consumers, young persons, older persons, anybody?
Yeah, I think I always answer that question or think about it, or when I wrote the book, was for anyone who feels overwhelmed. They want to move in a sustainable direction. They want to participate in some kind of environmental journey, but they don't know what to do. They feel paralyzed to take action. And they end up kind of just one of the points I make in the book. I point out the book is about sort of, I run into all of these, I call them bandits, meaning they steal a sustainability mindset, path of least resistance, cost, convenience, not in my backyard. There's 18 different bandits that we all run into when we're sort of moving in this direction. And I struggle to overcome those bandits and deal with them. And something happens in the book, I won't spoil that you're able to overcome that and really sort of feel good about charting your own journey. And so many people, when they ask me about the book, they want to know what to do. And I always struggle with that because I don't think it's a simple check off. Now, I can give you ideas, and I think we all can. You can Google ideas, but I really think it's a mindset. I think when you learn a little bit and you become aware in your own world, in your own organization, your own life, it begins to take on a life of its own. And I talk about this in the book, where once you get into your sustainability boat, I kind of make this analogy, you kind of say, well, what do I do next? And I talk about ALMS, ALMS. It's just a way to remember it. A is awareness. I think the more aware you are, the more in tune you are with something to do. L is for like, meaning move in a direction in things that you like. So if you like boating, maybe there's a beach cleanup or a river cleanup effort you can take part in. M is move. Not take an action, but move in that direction. And S is signal. Because I think when you signal to others, they begin to say, Trent just put a rain barrel out by his gutter. So instead of the water going into the ground, he's putting it in a barrel and he's using it to water his plants. Well, next thing you know, my neighbor's got a rain barrel, right? So
right.
I think this sort of idea of, I'm not going to, go out and preach it, but I think when you signal in some way, shape, or form. So I sort of give that as a way to move forward is awareness, do something that you like, move in that direction, and then signal. Kind of give alms to the environment, I guess you could say.
Right. That's great. So what kind of feedback have you gotten? And has anybody, it sounds like a lot of people still want to know what should they do or what direction should they go, but have you heard from anyone who has taken some action and found some good results?
Yeah. So one of the things that was really, really neat in this whole process is when I was writing this book, the book is about, I mentioned it's about running into these bandits, but the main plot of the book is about going back to my hometown. So my hometown is this small little town called Nassau, New York. It's midway between Albany, New York, and Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And it is about 3 miles from a Superfund site. So a Superfund site is a federally recognized area in the United States where environmental degradation is so extreme, it gets put on a national priority list and funds are available to try and clean up those sites. And lo and behold, there's over 1,300 Superfund sites in America today. 22% of Americans live within 3 miles of a Superfund site. So this isn't just a Nassau story. It's a story all over the place. So I went back to Nassau. I grew up there. Toxic waste was dumped in open pits from 1952 to 1968.
Yeah.
The chemicals and toxic waste seeped into underwater aquifers and streams that infected Nassau Lake, which is about a mile from the house I grew up in. And the lake has been dead ever since 1970. And it's no different today. So I went back to the town that I grew up in and did some interviews. And I went to the library. So the library is this small little quaint, it's called the Nassau Free Library. And it's the same library. I think it's in the same condition as when I was a 3-year-old going there as a toddler. But I did all of the research there because all of the newspapers and all of the articles that were housed in that library spoke to the local things that happened back in the 50s and 60s that created this situation. So my book opening was at the library. And I've gotten the opportunity to do this at multiple libraries. And Laura, to your point, this is where you get those questions and you get that feedback. And when I did the opening back in September, I've had a bunch of people email me or call me and just sort of talk about the awareness piece, that they're much more aware now than they've been before. And at the end, they always want this. And I mentioned it, but they always want to check off. It's like, so at first I wasn't giving off like sort of my check off, but the last few presentations I've done, I've been like, you know what, I'm going to talk about how the mindset piece is really what moves the needle, I think, longer term, because you start to look for it in almost everything you do and you feel good about it. That's what's great. It's like, I really feel good about buying recycled content sneakers or mowing my lawn every other week or, buying a hybrid or, whatever it may be in your world. So I do have a list of 5 things that I always reluctantly give, but I call them B's and V's. So here they are. So B number 1, buy recycled content. If you're not buying recycled content, you're not recycling. I love that sentiment because what buying recycled content does is it pulls the recycled content through the system. You are demanding from Patagonia that they have to go out and find recycled content to fill that demand. So I think we all see ourselves as participants in the supply side, like you're dumping your recyclables in the right area. But I think the demand side is as important, if not more. So whether it be packaging or whatever you're buying, you can buy recycled content and it really, really helps. Second is the one we've heard all the time is buy regionally or locally. It certainly cuts emissions. So those are the 2 B's. And there's 3 V's. V number 1 is value what you buy. So, buy things that are durable and long lasting and not cheap and disposable. The second V is verdict. This is my favorite one. You are the judge and jury of what you buy and how you dispose. Every time you do that, you are casting a mini vote on how you sort of see the world. And when you really embrace that, and realize that those things, that's true to some extent, then your actions become more consequential because you believe that to the extent where, everything I'm doing does have an effect. So I like the word verdict because you are the judge and jury. And then the third V is volunteer, because I think that's important. It makes that movement, that action more real when you get involved in something, be it a tree planting or planning board or river keeper cleanup or something like that. So B's and V's. So there it is. I give it up. People are twisting my arm. So there you go.
Got to give the people what they want.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's great. And to that point, you wrote a first book, felt like you were compelled to write a second book because there was more to say. People are asking for more now. Is there a third book? And how do you know when these books are finished? And then you say, okay, that's enough for now. I'll write about this again later.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll tell you the humbling story of my first book. So I was not an English major. I was not a journalism person. I just like the creative process in some way, shape, or form. So when I put this first book together, somebody said to me, you got to go find an editor. I was like, I do. So I was like, all right. So I found an editor and I said, so she called me, she goes, I'm interested in your topic. And she said, do you want a developmental edit or a copy and line edit? I said, hold on one second. So I get my phone out and said, Google, what is a developmental edit? What is a copy?
Yeah.
So I was like, so a developmental edit is moving chapters around and moving paragraphs here and there so it flows better. And a copy and line edit is line by line. You're going through the words and punctuation and all those things. So just, if that doesn't tell you I didn't know what I was doing, that it should. So she got my manuscript and she got back to me a week later and she said to me, I really like the way you write. She said, but no one's going to read this book. And I was like, what? I spent like 1,000 hours on this. She said, you have 125 footnotes for a 120-page book. You have told me what everybody else thinks. Every opinion you have is backed up by somebody else. But she said, I have no idea what you think. And what I'm really interested in is your perspective. And you have not done that. So I said to her, so does that mean I have to rewrite like 25%? She said, or like 75%. So,
wow.
So it was a great lesson because to answer your question, Laura, when I have something to say from my perspective, then I'll start maybe writing again another book, because I think that's the most important part. And anytime you talk to somebody, you guys talk to so many different people, that's probably what you're most interested in, right? Is their perspective, where they're coming from, and trying to contribute to sort of that bigger narrative. So that process really helped me. The second book, I didn't have to go through that. Much less footnotes on the second one, and you stick your neck out and try and figure it out.
Yeah. I'll tell you though, if it makes you feel better, I have a book publishing company and my business partner is our editor. And every book that we get, that's one of the very first things that we tell them. Like we read through it and we're like, this kind of says what you want to say, but where are you? You're not here. Like we don't feel you. And so that's almost always, it's very common. It's a very interesting phenomenon.
But when you're not in this world and you just sort of, you don't know that, you are very cautious about sort of sticking your neck out a little bit. And she really gave me the freedom to, embrace that, because that's what people want to know. They don't want to know what everybody else thinks because they could read that somewhere else, so.
Yeah. That's fabulous.
Well, then, I guess though, so you write the book, but how do you end the book? How do you end it? How do you know, okay, I'm done. I'm good. I have it set.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I question myself, you sort of keep writing, and I just think when it's over. I don't know how else to say it. I think you sort of come to this conclusion point. You've expressed yourself in a way. You've gotten this narrative, this story narrative completed. And I just think I think sometimes you don't know, and then you read it over and you're like, I think we're done there.
Right.
For me, yeah.
Golly. So because it's funny, because for me, it's like, I feel like I would start and stop 1,000 times. And so I don't know. Or then there's one day, it's like you have a day where you're like, I'm writing for the entire week, and you just bang it all out? Or is it like, I'm going to a cabin in the woods for 4 months and I'll see you guys later? Like, how do you do that process?
Yeah, I am a early morning person and a late night person. And, you're working during the day. I have 3 kids and my wife. And so we're sort of busy during the day, but I I feel like my most creative time is definitely in the morning. You sort of get up and you have these new ideas, and you sort of flush them out. So I don't think if I could do it ideally, I'd do that cabin in the woods thing, but I can't do that. And sometimes you sort of get on a roll, but you got to get away from it because you got to go back to work or whatever.
Right. You're like, I just got to finish. I know I got a meeting. Right. Yeah. Well, that's really fun. It's like I love the creative process there too. So you mentioned too, also talking about your books, that you did have people that you were reading about and getting quotes from or footnotes for and everything like that. So do you have people that have influenced you along the way? Like, can you talk to some of those influences that you've had?
Yeah. So I would say one of the biggest influences I had was a professor at Harvard University. So as I mentioned, when I first got there and we walked in the room, I was kind of looking for a place to hide. You're sort of looking for that back corner of the room. But there were 64 of us there, and there's 64 seats, 8 chairs at 8 tables. So, it was find a friend. There's no place to hide. And the first thing she said was, I'm probably not going to teach you anything new, but I'm going to offer you a way to think in a different way. And that has always really resonated with me. I think a lot of the things in the sustainability space aren't super new, but it really requires you to think in a different way. And I think I really, really embraced that. And she was super special in my journey. She actually she's on the back of my first book. Her name's Leith Sharp, and she's the director over at that Harvard program. So she was super important. It's the first person that always comes to mind when I go through this.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And I think it's really important to talk through mentors and people that really guide you to where you are. I think it's a really great conversation piece always. And, it's funny though, like we're talking about sustainability, and it's just one of the things that's popping into my head is, it's like, okay, so plastic bags, that's the company. And then you transition to sustainability. And, there's a perception of plastic bag waste and challenges with the use of plastics. So like, what advice would you have for businesses, like other business owners? Because it's almost super easy to be like, well, we're a plastic bag company. There's nothing we can do. This is our industry. So why would we want to be sustainable? And, obviously you have a path forward. You definitely had, and it's been really beneficial, very helpful for your business. What would you say to other business owners who maybe like, because I think there's a big concern sometimes with sustainability, right? It's, how can I do this? I can't do this. So I'm not even going to try. How do you get to them?
I answer that in 2 parts. So anytime I travel, I use Delta Airlines because you get points, and whoever you use, you sort of stick with them. So I got on a flight a couple months ago, and I sit down and I get an alert on my phone that says, do you want to see our sustainability initiatives? This is from Delta. I'm like, you are talking to the right guy. So I was like, bang, right?
Yes.
Yes. So the first thing they say, this is Delta Airlines now, it says, we are in a hard to abate sector, meaning their biggest issue by far, their biggest contributor to greenhouse gases and their biggest sustainability issue is jet fuel. But there's nothing they can do about it.
Yeah.
So the airline industry could very easily just say, well, you know what am I going to do? Do you want to travel? Do you want to take a plane? Because if you do, we need to use jet fuel unless you want to pay 7 times what you're paying now, for us. And we can't do that. But they didn't do that. So they acknowledge that, hey, this is an issue. We are investing in biofuels. We're investing in this. We're doing this to try to address that longer term. But in the meantime, here's a whole list of other things that we're doing in this space. And I also think sustainability isn't just about the E, right? It's not just about the environmental piece, although I think most people just sort of think of it that way. It's the environmental piece. It's the social piece. It's the employee health and well-being. It's the community involvement. It's safety records at work, things like that. And it's the G. I think the G is often forgot all the time. And that's the governance. How are you governing your company's efforts on the E and the S? And so it's sort of this ESG, environmental social governance thing. But I'll go back to where we started. Anytime we talk, it has to make sense for the business. So we start, if I could wrap up sustainability in 4 words, and I'm way oversimplifying it, but these are the 4 steps I go through with every company. 1, stakeholders. What are your stakeholders? Honestly, what are your stakeholders telling you or suggesting that you do? Because they will provide you the issues to think about. So do a stakeholder viewpoint. get a list of issues. Then you do what they call as a materiality assessment, which means you're prioritizing those issues. So the issues have to be good for the business and the stakeholders. So it allows you to prioritize those issues. Once you have the priority issues, then you take authentic actions to address those issues, and then you communicate back to stakeholders. So it's almost like this circular flow.
Yeah.
This happens not all the time, but sometimes somebody will say, well, we're going to use less paper in the office. I'll be like, it's a fine initiative, but is that really important to the business? And is it really important to stakeholders? I'm not saying it's not, but plastic waste is very important to stakeholders, communities, regulation, and it's very important for the business to recognize that. Let's put our time and resources into that. Happy to use less paper in the office, but there's a process you go through to sort of chart these things against one another. It allows you to prioritize the issues. And then a lot of small and medium-sized businesses who I deal with, they don't have a sustainability department, right? They have limited time and resources. So we pick one or two issues that are most material, most important to the business, and then we address them. And once we do that, we go to the next ones. It just allows you to say, hey, yeah, you can use less paper in the office or something that isn't a huge priority. And you know why, because it's really it's not going to move the needle for the business. And it's not that important to the majority of stakeholders. So it's stakeholders, materiality, which gives you the priority, authentic action, and communicate. Those are the four things we try and do over and over.
Yeah, which is really great. And like I say, if Delta can do it, if you can handle it, I mean, there's no.
Right. And I think what gets lost in this conversation so much is transition. Like I said to you before, we can't just shut down Clearview Bag, right? Like we have 70 families who are interested, they rely on the business. So can we transition in that direction? And what makes the transition hard is when you don't have regulation backing that up, it can turn into voluntary disclosure. It is in the States, for the most part, it's voluntary disclosure.
Right.
But the two major tailwinds that will help is regulation and two, big business. And the big business piece is happening. If you go on any major brand, pick a brand, you go on their website homepage, they will have a sustainability link right there. And then you'll probably pull up a 50-page document that tells you all the things that they're doing. So what those big businesses do is they have a sustainability plan and goals that's reliant on their supply chain. So it's coming upstream. So you may be a small person, 3 companies removed, but we're starting to get those questionnaires from that big business. So the big business piece, their investment in this space is almost forcing upstream supply chain to sort of react.
Yeah, that's very cool. I like that. Yeah, and it makes a ton of sense, actually. Yeah.
Yep. Everybody needs that influence. What are the big dogs doing? And then we shall follow.
Yeah.
So, well, now it's time for field notes. It's a part of our show where we talk to our guests about memorable moments in the field. And your field is maybe a little different. We encourage listeners to submit their own stories. As environmentalists and environmental sciences, sustainability persons, we all have this connection of weird and funny things that have happened to us as we try to educate, deliver the work, do the work in the field. So from your field, which is, in the office with a client, whatever it might be, do you have something memorable that may have happened that you could share with us?
Yes, I do. So one of the things we applied to, I and a colleague applied to do a TED Talk in Boston. Mm-hmm. So awesome. We did that in 2022. And 3 months prior to that, the whole process as we applied, we got accepted and we began to practice a lot, knowing that there's no PowerPoint. There's no, you got to memorize it, right? You're on a tightrope and there is no net, Right. So kind of knew that going in. Well, lo and behold, the day comes. We go to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the MIT Media Lab. Just being on MIT's campus is intimidating enough in a certain sense. So right. We go to the 3rd floor. The elevators open up and bam, it hit me. It was first stop was the makeup room, right? Second stop was professional photographer. Third stop was if you wanted to get something to eat, they had this giant spread. Then we got sort of these gifts. And then we sort of got funneled into the stage and there's 500 seats with 3 camera pits. And the stage had TEDx Boston behind it with giant screens with that big red dot on the, awesome. on the stage. And every speaker had 10 minutes and then 5 minutes transition. So it was all day, from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. It was overwhelming. There was tons of people. It was everything that I sort of thought it was. I don't know why I thought this was sort of the minor league of TED Talks, but I did. And then when I got there, sort of my nerves went from maybe a 5 to a 9 out of 10.
Right.
So we go backstage about a half an hour before to get in line to get mic'd up and whatnot. And you start chatting with the people around you to sort of pass the time. So I asked the woman in front of me, I said, what do you do? And she looked at me and she said, I'm an astronaut.
Yeah.
And I know that there's only like 500 astronauts in the history of the world.
Right.
And my nerves went from 9 to 15 in about 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So I told my partner, I was like, you have to excuse me. I went to the MIT bathroom. I locked myself in the stall and I just did some breathing exercises. I went back over my lines, right? Come back out, get mic'd up. Thankfully, it went fine. Everything was as good as I could have expected, I guess is the best way to say it. And on the way home, so I'm alone on the way home, driving 3 hours home. And I thought to myself, what would I have said if I gave her a chance to say to me, what do you do? Mm-hmm. And I think I would have liked to have said, I'm not an astronaut. But I think that's the point, is that you don't have to be an astronaut, or you don't have to be an Ivy League professor or the CEO of a major brand to really begin to think about, be aware, learn, and really make a difference in whatever you're doing. So it really did. She was a wonderful speaker. She was great. The astronaut, that is. But that whole experience really made me sort of appreciate that there's many more non-astronauts than there are astronauts, and sort of everybody was welcomed at this event. And I really appreciated that.
That's a great story.
It's great. I love it.
All right. Well, we are getting close to our time, so we'll run into some pretty easy questions here. I saw on your author page that you had routines as one of your favorite things. So I'm curious, what makes someone a huge fan of routines?
I don't know. I think it just gives me structure. I think I sort of have this routine of doing, exercising every day, trying to write every day, trying to reflect a little bit every day, making sure I, pay attention to my family, keeping them in the proper perspective as sort of the guiding force for my life and things like that. And I think trying to continue that routine keeps things in focus and the priorities in place.
Oh yeah. I mean,
that's awesome.
Yeah, routines are super important. It's I can't agree more. So
but sometimes that gets you in trouble, right? You're like,
oh, I know.
My wife's like, well, what are you doing? What do you like? Can we break this routine a little bit? And I'm like, well,
nope.
Well, it's like I eat breakfast at 7:05, and no, that's actually, it's funny. I love routines too, but I also love being a little bit chaotic. So I will never set an alarm for a normal time. So I won't wake up at 7:30. I'll wake up at 7:28, or you know what I mean? Just for my own quirkiness. That's how I both have routines and feel a little bit like they're not
rebel against it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, sometimes I'll take an alternative route to work, and I feel like that's breaking my routine. I mean, that is so low hanging fruit. I don't even know.
Right?
That's not really come on. That's not really go to a different gas station. Does that count as breaking your routine?
But your routine can be
victories.
Like exercise, but you don't have to do the same exercise every time.
Go. Right. Exactly.
Thank you, Laura. That's right. Yeah. There you go.
Oh, man. Well, I hate to say that we're running out of time, but before we let you go, is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
I guess I always think to myself, and this is sort of what got me on this journey was, I think if you're waiting for someone else to lead, it's probably you we are waiting for. And remember somebody saying that, 7-8 years ago, and I was in the audience, and I was like, I was one of those ones that was always waiting. I was like, well, I guess I'll do something someday. And I think when you become more aware and you begin to learn, you can do something. And I think that's sort of the whole point of what I try and do.
Yeah, that is great, succinct advice. I love that. It's a great way to end. Last but not least, where can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so my website's the best way. Happy to help or interact in any way somebody may need, www.trentromer.com has my books. I have an online course there. I blog regularly. There's a newsletter. So there's a bunch of different ways to interact.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Trent. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And that's our show. Thank you, Trent, for joining us today. Please be sure to check us out each and every Friday. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. See you, everybody.
Bye.